The GypLyner IWL system can be used to increase sound insulation and improve thermal performance requirements of new or existing buildings. We'll be using GypFrame C-studs 48S50 and I-studs 48I50. The channels are 2 mm wider to accommodate the stud width, so we're using 50 FEC50 channels. GypFrame 99 FC50 fixing channels will be used to allow fixing of medium weight fixtures to wall linings, with proprietary fixings being used. British Gypsum wafer head screws are used for metal-to-metal fixings, and drywall screws are used to fix Thermaline or Gyprock plasterboards onto the GypLyner IWL system. For framing where studs are greater than 0.8 mm in thickness and I-studs are greater than 0.55 mm in thickness, British Gypsum wafer head jack point and drywall jack point screws should be used. Notice the drill tip, which pre-drills thicker gauge metal before self-tapping into the GypFrame sections. GypFrame channels are fixed to the floor and ceiling, and then GypFrame I-studs are inserted into the channels to form a lining. This is then boarded with Gyprock Thermaline boards. There are a range of Gyprock Thermaline boards which can be used. They are Gyprock Thermaline Basic, Plus, Super and PIR. When skirting boards are removed, very often the plaster will not continue down to the floor surface and there'll be gaps between the floorboards and masonry wall. When this occurs, it is important to fill the void with any thistle undercoat plaster to minimise any air leakage when the new lining system is installed. Ensure all surfaces have been isolated by a competent tradesperson to enable works to start. First, we need to determine the high spots on the wall, plus a minimum 10 mm. Mark the plumb position to the ceiling and floor at both ends of the wall. This is to ensure the framework remains independent of the existing wall. Then, mark the width of the channel from this plumb point with a pencil. Once this is done, strike a chalk line on the floor and the ceiling. On uneven floors or where the design of the building dictates, 38 mm deep timber sole plates with width of the channels are fixed to the floor first with suitable fixings. Once the GypFrame floor and ceiling channels are cut, they can be fixed into place using suitable fixings at 600 mm centres. At wall abutments, you would not use an I-stud. In this instance, a GypFrame C-stud would be used. This enables the stud to sit flat against the wall to allow fixing into place at 600 mm centres. Once GypFrame C-studs have been measured, cut them to the required length. GypFrame C-studs are used either sides of openings. This allows board fixing into the C-stud profile for the reveal board. GypFrame C-studs are plumbed into position with a spirit level and fixed at the head and the base using British Gypsum wafer head screws or a crimping tool. The wall lining is marked out at 600 mm centres for the position of the I-studs. Once the I-studs have been measured, cut them to the required length using an abrasive wheel cut-off saw. Ensure you're wearing the appropriate PPE before cutting the I-studs to length. I-studs are then located into the floor and ceiling channel at 600 mm centres. Once the framework has been completed, it is important to run a bead of Gyprock sealant around the perimeter of the framework to minimise air leakage. Measure the Gyprock Thermaline board to the correct height and cut to length with a saw. At openings where Gyprock Thermaline boards create an external corner, it is important to cut the insulation back to the width of the Thermaline board that is being returned into the reveal. Once in position, Gyprock Thermaline boards can now be fixed into place at 300 mm centres. At external angles, fixings are reduced to 200 mm centres. For example, window reveals. It is important to return thermal board into the reveal and not use standard Gyprock wallboard. Thermal bridging around openings can provide significant heat loss when Gyprock Thermaline boards are not used. Gyprock sealant is used to fix the Gyprock Thermaline board at the reveal. Where the window does not have sufficient frame exposed to allow a Thermaline board to be used at the reveal, the plaster would need to be chiselled back to the brickwork to accommodate it. The Thermaline board is also fixed into the GypFrame C-stud profile at 200 mm centres. Apply sealant at the perimeter to prevent any airflow within the cavity and the lining system. Gypframe C-stud is used at internal angles and fixed into place at 600mm centres. Gypframe 99 FC50 can be used as a service support within the lining system. Continue to fix the Gyprock thermaline boards in place at 300mm centres and reduce to 200mm centres at external corners. When complete, it is ready for a skim coat of thistle board finish or multi-finish plaster. Alternatively, Gyprock jointing products can be used. When built using all British gypsum components, the GypLyner IWL system will be covered by the Spec Show guarantee.